What's going on, everyone? It's been a while since I've been back here on youtube.com. Just had some personal stuff come up, busy with the holidays, and to be perfectly honest, I have had trouble in set 6 format getting wins. I just couldn't make it work with any deck. I was feeling kind of demoralized. And, it's tough to make videos telling people how to play the game when you feel like you can't even play the game yourself. But luckily, I have a really awesome group of friends and playtesting buddies, and been jamming games against them, like literally nonstop for the past week, trying to get back into the groove. And now that EX1 is here, hopefully that'll be a nice refresher for the format, and I really plan on starting to get back into the content grind. So we're going to start it off with a simple EX1 tier list. Just as a reminder from my previous BT6 meta snapshot / tier list video, my rubric goes as follows. Tier 1 decks, very likely to face this deck, especially at top tables, has a strong win condition. It enables people who are not as good at the game to get a lot more wins than they normally would. It's a consistent deck, and it has favorable matchups into almost the entire field. For tier 2 decks, you are less likely to play against these decks in a tournament. They still have strong win conditions. Maybe they're a little less consistent, or the pilot has to be especially good at the deck in order to make it as strong as a tier 1 deck. It usually has at least 1 to 2 very favorable matchups into the meta, and it may have an unfavorable matchup against a popular deck, or it's just a worse version of a higher tier deck. And finally, tier 3, you're unlikely to play against this deck in the top tables. Usually these are just the for fun decks, decks that have interesting win conditions or ways to play the game. These are decks that you mostly play to kind of take a break from your main meta deck, or if you just feel like trolling around a bit at your locals. Alright, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Gonna bust out the old tier maker here. Alright, so let's just go in order, I guess. So this Nokia I'm using to represent both Greymon and Garurumon tribal decks. More so the Greymon tribal, which I think is actually going to be pretty good with some of the EX1 cards, including the Agumon with the Inheritable that searches out ties and other Agumons. Then there's the Greymon with the Inheritable that lets you play them for free. Then there's the Metal Greymon, the new one that can digivolve from red or black, which gives you another good Metal Greymon target for the Metal Greymon Ultras mode. So I think it's going to be a pretty consistent deck. Your top end level 7 can be even Agubond itself, so, and then you can maybe fit in like a little mini Agubond engine with some BT6 ties. I think it's going to be a powerful deck. It's going to require some interesting deck building from the pilot, and they're really going to have to know what they're doing, but I think we can see this deck take some wins, and for that reason I think I'm going to put it tier 2 for now. I think if you're not so sure about this deck, look into it. I might even do a video on it, but I think this is one to look out for. Hexablowmon / Azulongmon, definitely a fan favorite deck. I know a lot of people really swear by this deck for whatever reason, and it definitely can get wins. Hexablow is a really annoying card to get over, and just the entire deck really like feeds into itself really easily with the Sora and Joes and all the other source removal. So then you get a lot of memory, and then you can gain a lot of memory from your Goemons and your Blukamons, and then there's a lot of draw power from the Upamons and the other egg, the new one from BT6, I forget its name, like Kiarumon or something like that. The deck just is actually surprisingly consistent. Unfortunately, it can get like bopped super easily, especially by like Justimon, and I think Bond of Friendship does a good job too if you draw your out into Hexablow. So yeah, it's an okay deck. It's definitely better than just being for fun. I don't necessarily think it's tier 3 anymore either. It's like somewhere in between here. Maybe it's like at the top of tier 3, like bottom of tier 2, and it gets better as the pilot gets better. So we'll leave it there for now. Agubond. Let's see, in my last BT6 video, I put this as a tier 2 deck, and I think that was probably a mistake. I think I underestimated for sure the value of the promo Greymon that gives security +1. That card is absolutely insane. It solo carries games way more than Bond itself ever does. And then with the introduction of the starter decks, which give Geo Greymon and what's Lightning Joust and Atomic Blaster, like, this deck got a huge boost from the starter decks. And in EX1, it also gets the Skull Greymon, which gets security +1 and sets up another Agumon on your board when it deletes itself, so you can pressure with the Bond Warp. And it also combos with Analog Boy if you can find room for all that stuff. Plus, Atomic Blaster and Gaia Force are very powerful removal options that the blue bonded deck doesn't necessarily have access to. So I think this deck is actually in contention with Bond of Friendship for being like the strongest deck in the format, especially considering the fact that it actually has a good matchup into Bond of Friendship itself. So this is absolutely a tier 1 deck without a doubt. Super, super strong. If you don't want to play blue Bond, red Bond is definitely an option. I will say it has an awful black matchup, just because if they get out Cranium plus Mechanorimon, that's basically just like the GG I win for black. But if you don't let them get there with your removal, or, I mean, black is pretty slow and red is very fast, so you can sometimes just even beat them before they get to that point. Definitely tier 1 deck. Machine Dramon. I'm going to be honest, I don't know too much about this deck. I just know you kind of just like build your big Megazord stack and then like hope that's enough to win the game off of. I know a lot of people are hyped about this deck. I haven't really seen it in action too much myself, so I can't really speak to how good it is. I'm going to put it in tier 3 for now, or maybe for fun. We'll put it in for fun, and then we can revisit this list later and see how stupid I was for ignoring this deck. Alright, Imperial Dramon EX1 got some new tools. New XVmon is good. The new Pyro Dramon is good. The new Imperial Dramon itself is good. The problem with the deck is that it's still just Justimon light. Until the Imperial Dramon structure deck comes out, this is, with like the DNA fusion stuff, this is definitely just Justimon light with the multiple attacks and aggressive abilities. You do get access to Ice Wall and Hammer Spark, which Justimon doesn't, and you are more consistent since you don't have to fit in Sistermon engine, so you can just play all your blue cards and then be in color the entire time in your deck. But I think this deck suffers from the fact that if you don't hit your pieces and like can do your big multiple turn swings, you don't run removal, and you're very susceptible to removal yourself. So like one Bond of Friendship turn is going to wipe your board and you're not going to be able to clear their stuff out. So Agu Bond is the same way with Atomic Blaster and Gaia Force. Like, you're very susceptible to those cards, and for that reason I think this is probably going to be a tier, honestly I think it's a tier, like bottom of tier 2 deck. This is going to be like at the bottom of tier 2. So it's probably on par with Hexablow actually. So these two are kind of on the same level. But we'll leave it here for now. Lilithmon. This is a deck I also slept on my last tier list video. I underestimated the value of the Ginkakumon package in your level 4s and how much consistency and speed it gave the deck. And it also gives you an option to win the game with your Mega Digimon Fusion combo instead of just like making a big board. So it still does fall to the trap that you have to be good at playing the deck, really good at playing the deck, in order to make it work effectively, because you're going to be put in a lot of situations where if you discarded the wrong card from your hand, or if you misread your trash and you thought you had a card but you ended up not actually having it in there, or you know, sometimes even like one of your Ginkakumon promotes doesn't die when you swing into security, so you can't bring it back to get the extra check. There's just a lot of things that could go wrong with the deck that if you don't foresee it, then you're gonna fall flat on your face, and it's gonna be really awkward for you because you just spent 20 minutes having a Yu-Gi-Oh turn and then just do nothing with it. So I still think this is at least a 1.5 deck, potential to be like the bottom of tier 1 if the pilot is very, very, very good and also a little bit lucky. So yeah, Lilithmon, don't sleep on it for sure. They're gonna get a little bit of a nerf once Fusion gets hit at the end of the month, but we still have a month of Fusion. Fusion is still going to be legal for the national tournament, so watch out for the Lilith loop if you're doing that. Justimon, this is an insane deck if you cannot brick. If you're really good at drawing cards when you need them, if you're one of those guys who just like has the heart of the cards, like you all know who I'm talking about. They're just guys who always draw what they need. Then I really hope they're playing Justimon, because then they're probably winning every single game. Especially in EX1, you get tools like emergency program shutdown, which kind of helps you counter security controls like only real out to Justimon, which is Sakuyamon. So what they would do is they would bring out the Sakuyamon to prevent the Justimon from coming out of raising, and then even if the Justimon did come out of raising and then use like Judgment of the Blade to like clear some things, the security control player wouldn't lose any security and then would have the option to use an option on their turn to then clear the Justimon and then move on from that threat. But with program shutdown, and because Justimon has access to playing white options because of all the Sistermons, they can bring out the Justimon, use the Judgment of the Blade to clear the board, and then play shutdown, so that way the security control player can't clear the Justimon, and then you can just win next turn with a delicate plan. So it's a very strong combo. They are going to have to find room to fit in shutdown. I don't know how they're going to do it. The deck is just so tight. Space is so tight in that deck, and the bricks just keep on coming. You can build a house with how many bricks Justimon has. But nonetheless, when the deck hits, it hits hard, and it's tier 1 for sure. All right. Lord Knightmon. This is a deck I want to make work, but for whatever reason, I can just never draw my Lord Knightmons, but that's just me personally. I think if you can get your stack going and you can be on curve, this deck can definitely fight. It can definitely compete. You do have access to Bushi for game. You can run Sakuyamons. Yellow War Greymon is still a good card. The deck has a lot of options. The problem is that every other deck, like I said in the last video, has gotten so much better and this one kind of stayed the same. So it doesn't really feel as oppressive as it did in set 5. Nevertheless, I still think this is a competitive tier 2 deck. You can win games if you draw on curve and you can keep your Lord Knight swinging for advantages. It didn't really gain that much from EX1, I don't think. None of the cards really stand out to me as like big upgrades to this deck from that set, so it just kind of stayed the same from if you were playing it in BT6 or not. Security control, I had this tier 1 for BT6, and I think actually as the BT6 meta went on, this deck actually got less powerful because people figured out that it has some really bad matchups. People started taking Delicate Plan into every deck and then making up like weird soda names for the decks. It was just weird. Like, don't call your deck Pepsi or Dr. Pepper. That's weird. It's weird. Just don't. And like then Agumon got really popular, which actually also has like a inherently good security control matchup. Lilithmon, people figured out the deck was still crazy good, which has an insanely good security control matchup. And then people figured out that with Gabumon, as if you play for your hybrids to kill, then you can out security control. It's still a hard matchup, but it's not unwinnable like people thought it was. I think security control definitely got knocked down a few pegs, and then with the introduction of program shutdown in EX1, which you might see teched in some decks, I think this deck definitely gets knocked down a peg. And it has a horrendous Justimon matchup. Horrendous. Justimon also giga claps this deck, like extremely. So definitely weaker than Justimon. Definitely weaker than Agumon. Loses to Lilithmon. But I think it still is the same annoying type deck against the rest of the field. So for that reason, I think it's a tier 1.5. Maybe like the bottom of tier 1.5. Yeah. And then let's move on to BL Starmon, 3 Musketeers. I think this is a deck that started off really popular, but then kind of fell off. I still think it's a 1.5 deck for sure. As far as purple decks go, I don't necessarily know if I would consider Justimon like a legit purple deck, even though like it mills and it plays some purple cards. It's just like its own kind of thing. That still has the best late game out of any deck in the format. Once they get to the point where they can start dropping Justimons for like 2 or 3 memory and then casting Nailbones like for free, it becomes pretty overwhelming, and then they can constantly keep recycling those Justimons with Impmons and Mats and whatever else they have in their deck. So definitely watch out for it. You have to beat them fast, and their security can be scary, but at the same time they can be played around a bit more than security control, I feel like, and they're not quite as explosive as Lilith Loop can be as long as you keep them away from that super late game. So I think it's less powerful than Lilith or even Titamon, but it's still 1.5. All right, Black Royal Knights. I had this deck 1.5 at E in set 6, and then as the meta progressed and as even I was playing this deck, I felt that the deck was just too slow. It was really linear. Like, you had some decisions you could make, but overall it just felt like really one note, and if they can out your Craniumon, it feels like you weren't really doing much after that. So I think this is like a top of tier 2 deck. At least that's how I was feeling the deck, and it hasn't really posted up results that much either. Yeah, I think you just kind of skip over this deck unless you really want to play Cranium Mechanorimon, like annoying stall type tactics. Otherwise, you can kind of just leave this deck as it is, and it's not really that scary. As long as you have like an out to Craniumon in your deck, then you're fine. And even then, like, Craniumon can only block one thing, so you can attack over it with multiple attacks. Bond of Friendship, best deck? Question mark. I think it's actually tied. I think all of these are like equally good. Like, they each do different things. So Agumon is more aggressive, Gabumon can be more controlling, and then Justimon is like, just if I draw my cards I win. So I think these are all pretty much on even tiers. If you play any of these 3 decks, then you're going to be in a good spot for a tournament, and you are going to have a good matchup into any of the other 3 decks as well, as long as you know your matchups, know how to play, and you practice. So any of these 3 decks are good. Justimon and EX1 boosts, it did get program shutdown, so you can stop people from killing your Justimon with options on their turn, which is kind of a big deal. Or even your Savior Hux, you can protect your Savior Hux that way, but you have to fit the card in, so I don't know how they're going to do that, but it doesn't matter because the deck is still good. Green, I used Mimi for all the different kinds of green decks that are going to be out there. There's Nidhogg Troymon, there's still Green OTK. I'm still trying to play Herc from the starter deck, which I think is still kind of good. What else? There's the new stuff from EX1, the Insectoid package stuff. There's just a lot of things you can do with green right now. I think depending on the variant that you go towards, kind of depends on like how good your deck is going to be. Like, you can go full for fun meme and play Gacha Green, or you can go like Troymon, Nidhoggmon and try to be like a control-y and have some like decent matchups if you draw well. But I think overall green is probably like top of tier 3, bottom of tier 2, depending on which variant you go for, and you can even go as low as for fun. But if you're playing green, it's because you're a dedicated green player, and if you're a green player like me, we're all just biding our times for set 7 waiting room, when we can hidden potential Susanoo on people, and it's going to be fantastic. Mastermon, I was trying to make this deck work so much in set 6, and burning yourself oftentimes felt like it was actually more of a detriment than a boon, unlike before, where it didn't really matter if you burn yourself because you could just recover, because every deck is just like, these decks are just so much faster that losing your 1 security can really like screw you over. So I think Mastermon unfortunately has been demoted to for fun, strictly for fun tier, and I hate to say it, but it's true. Sorry, Mastermons, our time will come when the starter deck comes out. Eosmon for fun. It did get actually some like good support in EX1. So you have Analog Boy or Analog Youth, sorry, as like another white tamer that you can play for free off EOS level 4, and it also searches your EOSs, which is good. You have win rate 60%, which lets you play the level 6 EOS for 3 memory instead of 5, which is good. And you're going to have a lot of extra Eosmons you can pitch in your hand and then bring it back with the Eosmon of level 6 effect. There's some synergy there for sure. You can tech in like black cards and then do Zubagon Punch on your EOS level 6. So it has blocker, reboot, and security +1. Well, I guess it would be like security +3 because of its own effect. Not bad. Not bad. There's potential. Definitely for fun. So, yeah. I might play it for fun. I will play it for fun. Watch out for my Eosmon deck profile. And last card on the list is Digimon. I think this deck is good. I'm gonna put it 1.5 next to Lilithmon. There's different ways you can take the deck. You can go just like pure Digimon beatdown, and I think that's a perfectly fine way to play the deck. You can tech in a couple Liliths and some Jack Raids and some White Tamers and Fusions, and then you can play like a Lilith loop type deck, but you have the option to go aggressive with Digimon. I think Lilithmon and Digimon are kind of like two sides of the same coin, or they can literally just be the same deck. So for that reason, I think it has to be right on there on par with Lilithmon. And if you're playing against this deck, you kind of have to see what they're trying to do. If you see them drop a White Tamer, then assume the fusion is going to come out at some point later down the line with the Lilithmons. If you see people were playing Marcus with Delicate Plan, then get prepared to be OTK'd. If you see Mimis, then they're going to play the Mimi Jack Raid engine, and they can control your options on your turn because the purple Mimi works on both turns. So they can tap it to gain a memory on your turn and then pass your turn over, which can screw you over. There's different ways to play the deck, and you're just going to have to feel it out and see what the opponent's trying to do and play accordingly. All right. I think that's pretty much it. If I had to give you one deck to look out for from this tier list that I probably might have misread, I'm going to go with the Greymon tribal deck. I think the Greymon tribal deck is a little sleeper, actually. I think it can be good. I think it can be really good. So keep an eye out for that. The Gabumon tribal deck, maybe not so much. But the Garurumons are so bad. But everything else, I think, is relatively spot on. May have misread Machine Dramon as well, just because I don't really know much about that deck. And I think I forgot Diaboromon. Diaboromon. So they have the new Kurisarimon that gives everything decoy, and then they have the new Diaboromon, which gives everything blocker. So in theory, they could have a board full of Diaboromons that have decoy and blocker, which basically makes your big stuff immune to attacks and immune to destruction from effects. So in theory, in like an ideal world, like the Diaboromon board setup is probably the new EX1 Diaboromon, the security attack plus $1 million promo Diaboromon that costs way too much money, and then they have a Kurisarimon that gives everything decoy somewhere in there. And then there's the one that gives rush so that your tokens can attack the turn they come out. There's just so many things you can do with that deck. It's kind of like a jack of all trades deck. You can be aggressive, you can be controlling, you can be defensive. It's a black deck, so it's a white deck. You can play Armageddonmon for 3 with rush. I don't know. I honestly don't know. There's just too many things you can do with that deck. I'm sure someone out there has like a sick build that like does everything really good and is competitive, but until that person comes out with that deck, I think we're all kind of in the dark about this Diaboromon deck, because that promo Diaboromon was not in Japan, or was it? I think it's the Kurisarimon that gives decoy was not in Japan, something like that. But one of those key cards was not in Japan, so there's not really any data to pull from or like deck lists. So NA is kind of on its own in terms of how that deck is going to be built and played. So I'm going to leave it off the tier list for that reason. But I think it has potential, and don't be surprised if we start seeing some Diaboromon decks topping or like making waves. Hopefully you don't have to buy too many of those promo Diaboromons, because those shits are like $70, and if the deck starts popping up, they're gonna go up hella. And I don't know, maybe you're the guy who buys them as an investment. Maybe you're that guy. But for now, that's going to be it. Like I said, going to be going hard on the EX1 content. More videos to come. Thank you guys for sticking with me for the last pretty much like half a year or so. Been definitely over-promising and under-delivering as of late, but it's going to change. So, all right. GG's, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope this helps you pick your deck for the new format. And we'll see you for the set 7 tier list in about a month.